The tires of my Subaru crunched softly over the shell-strewn gravel as I turned into the narrow curve of my beach house driveway, the late afternoon sun painting streaks of gold across the hood. For years, that sound, the comforting crunch of shells under my wheels, had been my personal signal that I could finally exhale. This house wasn't just a property. It was my sanctuary, my safe harbor after endless weeks at coastal Florida Bank, where every smile had to be polite and every decision had to be cautious. It was my quiet corner of Sandpiper Beach, where the air always smelled faintly of salt and hibiscus, and the only voices were the gulls swooping overhead. But that day something was wrong. Even before I fully pulled in, my chest tightened. My driveway was never crowded, never. It had room for 2, maybe 3 cars at most, but I was forced to jerk my wheel at the last moment just to wedge behind the cluster already parked there. 4 unfamiliar vehicles lined the driveway like they owned it. A black SUV with tinted windows, a white pickup with ladders stacked in its bed, a champagne-colored sedan that screamed "wedding guest," and another car I didn't recognize at all, engine still ticking as if it had just arrived. I sat frozen for a moment, fingers gripping the steering wheel, staring at the foreign invaders occupying what was supposed to be my private space. My first thought was that I'd been burglarized. My second, that perhaps the neighbors had mistaken my house for an event rental. But then I caught at voices' laughter, the clink of something metallic drifting through the salty air. Not one voice. Many. Too many. I killed the engine and stepped out slowly, gravel crunching beneath my flats. The air was heavy with the tang of salt water, but also something else sweet cloying like roses or gardenias. I frowned. Roses. A muffled thump carried on the breeze, the unmistakable sound of hammering. And then a woman's voice, sharp and commanding. "No, no," curved the chair slightly. "We need symmetry. Guests will be furious if the aisle looks crooked in pictures." My stomach dropped. That voice. The gate to the backyard stood wide open, creaking slightly in the breeze. From where I stood, I could see flashes of white through the slats cloth, maybe flowers, something glittering in the fading sunlight. My pulse picked up. My sanctuary. My carefully maintained beachside escape wasn't just occupied, it was being transformed. My legs carried me forward before my mind caught up. I pushed the gate wider hinges, groaning in protest, and what I saw froze me in place. Rows upon rows of folding white chairs stretched across my lawn, splitting neatly down the middle to form an aisle lined with seashell-studded lanterns. At the far end, a wooden arch draped with gauzy fabric and woven with garlands of ivory roses stood planted in the sand as if it had always belonged. Strings of fairy lights dangled from my grandmother's oak tree, glimmering against the backdrop of waves. A massive catering tent loomed in the corner tables, stacked with silver trays, and people strangers, at least 20 of them, buzzed around like honeybees at a hive. Some were hauling boxes, others tying ribbons to my porch railing. My porch. My railing. It wasn't just a gathering. My yard had been converted into a full-blown wedding venue. And then I saw her. Serena. My younger sister. Blonde hair pulled back into a sleek bun clipboard tucked under one arm, the other pointing with authority at a man wobbling at the top of a ladder as he attempted to loop strands of twinkle lights around my oak tree. She wore that familiar expression, half condescension, half fake charm that she'd perfected since high school cheer captain days. "Curve them tighter," she instructed. "Thomas and I want the lights to frame us when we have our first dance." Thomas. My mind stuttered over the name. Thomas, the boyfriend of barely 8 months. Since when was there a wedding, let alone a first dance, planned under my oak tree? I should have stormed forward, screamed, demanded an explanation. Instead, I stood frozen, hidden by the gate, watching like a trespasser in my own home. Serena shifted her focus to a woman arranging flowers in glass vases. Higher, with the centerpieces, she commanded, tapping the clipboard. "We need drama. And double-check with the caterer about the seafood option. I want oysters, not clams." Seafood, centerpieces, first dance. My head spun. My gaze dropped to a long banquet table near the porch, stacked with envelopes. I moved closer, unable to stop myself until I could read the elegant calligraphy stamped across one Bennett Beach House wedding. My last name. My house. Something cracked inside me. The image of myself 5 years ago flashed in my mind, signing mortgage papers with shaking hands, tears of joy pricking my eyes as the realtor congratulated me. I'd worked double shifts for years, skipping dinners, forgoing vacations, eating peanut butter sandwiches at my desk, all so I could one day call this slice of sand and ocean mine. My reward for grinding through every dull, exhausting day at the bank was supposed to be this: the porch swing where I devoured paperbacks, the hammock under the oak where I listened to waves crash, the only thing I had that was mine alone. And yet, here it was stolen in plain sight. My sister, clipboard in hand, commanding strangers to decorate my home for a wedding I didn't know existed. Rain. Her voice cut through the din as her eyes finally landed on me. For a split second, I caught something unguarded, a flicker of guilt, maybe. But then her lips spread into a dazzling smile, the kind she used on teachers to talk herself out of late assignments. She waved me over as though I were nothing more than another vendor. Perfect timing. We need your input on the seating chart. I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, words strangled by shock. Finally, the only question that made it through came out hoarse. What is going on here? Serena's smile never faltered. Didn't Mom tell you we're finalizing details? The ceremony's next Saturday. She gestured around as if unveiling a masterpiece. Isn't it gorgeous? Her words barely registered. All I could hear was the pounding of blood in my ears. My house, my money, my life. And my sister had turned it into her wedding venue, without asking, without even telling me. I stood there trembling on the stones of my own garden path, and for the first time in years, a thought sharper than guilt cut through me. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. The world around me blurred as if the Florida humidity itself had thickened and wrapped around my lungs. My eyes darted from detail to detail, refusing to believe what I was seeing. White chairs glinting like rows of teeth in the afternoon sun. An archway decorated with roses and sheer fabric that billowed in the salty breeze. Lanterns, tablecloths, silverware polished so brightly they reflected the sky like mirrors. It wasn't just an event being planned. It was a wedding, a dream wedding, the kind I had once secretly imagined for myself in my loneliest moments back before I realized fairy tales belonged to other people. And here it was not for me, not even for a close cousin who might have asked politely, but for Serena executed on my land, my home, as if I were a guest at my own funeral. Rain. Serena's voice rang out again, smoother this time, slipping into that sweet but condescending tone she always used when she wanted something. Don't just stand there. We need to finalize the placement of the dessert table. Oh, and the seating chart, too. Come on. My body obeyed even as my mind screamed, no. I stepped forward onto the cool stone path I had laid myself one sweaty weekend 3 summers ago, every brick carefully leveled with my own hands. Strangers walked across it now, dragging extension cords, balancing crates of wine glasses, leaving behind faint scuffs with every careless step. Serena's eyes tracked me as I moved closer, her smile unwavering but sharp enough to cut glass. She was radiant in her element, wearing a fitted linen dress that screamed bride in command, her clipboard an extension of her arm. For years, she had trained herself to wield charm and authority interchangeably. In that moment, she used both as weapons. A woman in a fitted blazer headset perched over sleek brown hair bustled over. She extended her hand as if we were at a business meeting. You must be Rain, the generous sister I've heard so much about. I'm Vanessa, wedding planner. Her handshake was firm, professional, and it took me several seconds to realize I had offered mine in return. Generous sister, I repeated the words, tasting like ash. Vanessa smiled warmly, mistaking my shock for modesty. Serena told me you insisted on hosting the wedding here, and I must say you couldn't have picked a more perfect venue. The ocean backdrop, the oak tree, the cozy porch, it's everything couples dream about. I blinked, processing her words. Insisted, my mind screamed. I insisted on nothing. But Vanessa was already moving on, gesturing to a floral arrangement. We're going with white roses per Serena's vision. Elegant, timeless, dramatic. Guests will swoon. I opened my mouth to object, but Serena's voice sliced across mine. Rain, could you check those invitations over there? Make sure they're stacked neatly. We'll be sending the last batch tomorrow. My feet carried me toward the banquet table against my will, as if part of me needed proof this was real. 100 elegant envelopes lay fanned out like cards in a magician's trick. My hands trembled as I pulled one free. The words jumped at me in embossed gold. Serena Bennett and Thomas Hall joyfully invite you to celebrate their marriage at the Bennett Beach House, 219 Pelican Way, Sandpiper Beach, Florida. My house, my full address, printed on invitations sent to who knew how many people. I stood there dizzy. A memory slammed into me standing in this exact spot 5 years ago, clutching the keys the realtor handed me with a proud smile. My cheeks had hurt from grinning as I ran my palm over the porch railing, imagining years of solitary mornings with coffee and gulls overhead. But even that day hadn't been mine alone. Mom's voice had pierced my joy like a thorn. Such a waste for one person. The family could have bought a timeshare for everyone. And Serena, swirling champagne like the princess she fancied herself, had chimed in, "This will be perfect for family weekends. We'll never need a rental again." I had smiled politely back then, already feeling the invisible ownership of my home slip piece by piece. Since then, it had been borrowed without notice, crashed into by unexpected family guests, treated as a public clubhouse instead of my private haven. I had told myself to let it go. They were family after all. But this was different. This was theft. Serena's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts again, sugar-sweet but steely underneath. "Rain, could you move those wine boxes inside? Careful, they're heavy." I turned slowly. "Serena." My voice cracked with disbelief. "You're having your wedding. Here." Her eyes flickered just for a second. Guilt recognition, something human. Then it vanished. She plastered on her brightest, most innocent smile. "Of course. Didn't Mom tell you everyone knows? We've been planning this for months." She tilted her head as though I were the silly one. "You're just in time to help with place settings." "Months," I whispered. Vanessa's professional voice chimed in, oblivious to the dagger twisting inside me. "It's going to be exquisite. We're expecting 150 guests." Serena and Thomas were very clear about their vision. She beamed. And what a blessing to have such a generous sister open her home for the big day. Generous sister. That phrase again. Like I was no more than an accessory to Serena's happily ever after. I glanced around, my porch swing now burdened with stacked crates, my oak tree glowing with stolen fairy lights, my lawn trampled by strangers' shoes. Every corner of my sanctuary colonized for Serena's dream. The conversation around me blurred. I heard words: seafood option, dance floor placement, weather contingency plan, but they floated like meaningless syllables in a nightmare. My gaze locked on the embossed invitation in my hand. My name, erased my identity, twisted into the generous sister. The laughter of strangers filled my ears. The weight of years of family dismissal pressed down on my chest. For so long, I had been the responsible one, the reliable one, the sister who made sacrifices for harmony. But standing there, the glossy invitation crumpling between my fingers, I felt something unfamiliar stir inside me. Not guilt, not resignation. Something darker, something sharper. A promise forming like steel in my veins. This was the moment I realized they hadn't just invaded my house. They had declared war on my existence. And I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. I didn't move at first. My body rooted itself to the ground as though the shells and stones I'd laid in this garden years ago had grown vines that wrapped around my ankles. But my sister, my audacious clipboard-wielding sister, wasn't about to leave me standing like a statue. "Rain, don't just gawk." Serena tilted her head, her voice rising above the clatter of folding chairs and the drone of an electric saw cutting lumber for the stage. "Come on, help Vanessa with the seating chart. You're good with details." Her words landed with practiced ease, delivered like a compliment. But beneath the sugar, I heard the edge, an order disguised as flattery, the same tactic she'd used on me since we were kids. My lips felt numb, but finally the words scraped out. "Serena, are you serious right now? You planned your wedding here. My house without telling me." For a heartbeat, her smile cracked, her eyes darting sideways. Then the mask snapped back into place. She laughed lightly, the kind of laugh meant to smooth ruffled feathers at a bridal shower. Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. Mom knew, Dad knew, everyone knew. She waved her hand in the air as if that made it all legitimate. We just assumed you'd be thrilled. I mean, who wouldn't want their home featured in pictures this gorgeous? Thrilled. The word ricocheted through me like a slap. A man hauling a box of champagne flutes brushed past me, nearly knocking the invitation from my hand. I stepped back, colliding with the edge of a table stacked with rose vases. The glass tinkled threateningly. My breath hitched. I wasn't told I said sharper this time. Serena blinked innocently. Didn't Mom mention it? She swore she did. No, I spat. No one told me anything. I just walked into a wedding you're wedding in my backyard. A hush fell around us, subtle but real. Workers slowed their pace, eyes flicking between us like they'd stumbled into a family soap opera. Vanessa, the planner, looked startled, though she quickly tried to patch the moment with professional calm. I'm sure there's been some miscommunication. Serena said you insisted. I insisted. My voice cracked, then sharpened. I never said a word about this, not once. Serena's lips tightened. Her voice softened to that false, gentle cadence she used when she wanted to paint me as unreasonable. Rain, don't do this. You know I don't handle stress well. The wedding is next Saturday. Everything's arranged. It's too late to change anything now. She gestured at the rows of chairs, the hanging lights, the endless parade of strangers trampling my grass. Too late. As if her convenience outweighed my rights. Something snapped in me. This is my property, my deed, my mortgage, my house. And you didn't ask. She flinched barely, but I saw it. Then she recovered, setting her clipboard down with exaggerated care. Rain, she said in a voice coated with the condescension of an older sibling, even though I was the elder by 2 years. You're being selfish. It's one weekend. One. You live in your apartment most of the time anyway. What does it matter if we use the beach house for something meaningful? Meaningful. The word lodged like glass in my throat. To her, my sacrifices, my endless nights working double shifts to afford this place were meaningless compared to her 3-day fairy tale. Vanessa, sensing danger, attempted to intervene again. Rain, the venue is perfect. Truly. Your generosity is remarkable. The family will remember this forever. Generosity, that damned word. It burned hotter every time they said it because generosity required a choice, and no one had given me one. My laugh burst out ragged and humorless. Generosity. You mean theft. You've stolen my house for your wedding, Serena. The planner froze. Workers stared openly now. Even the man on the ladder hesitated mid-reach, strands of fairy lights dangling from his hands. Serena's smile finally cracked. Her cheeks flushed, her voice losing its polished calm. Don't be ridiculous. Families share. You've always been so touchy about this house. We're family, Rain. Family. There it was. The ultimate trump card wielded like a chain around my neck. The word that had excused every invasion, every rearranged piece of furniture, every unannounced family weekend that left me cleaning wine stains from my grandmother's quilt. My voice dropped low cold. No. Family asks. Family respects. You don't. Serena opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Vanessa cleared her throat, trying to salvage her professional veneer. I think we should all take a breath. Rain, maybe you could step inside, have some water. I turned on her sharply. This is not a venue. This is my home. Gasps fluttered through the crowd of workers. Serena's jaw set her shoulders rigid. You're embarrassing me, she hissed, stepping closer so only I could hear. Her perfume, some expensive floral blend, curled around me, cloying. Don't ruin this, Rain. Do you want to be the villain in front of everyone? Do you want people whispering about how selfish you are? Her words, once effective, bounced off me this time. My hands trembled, but not from fear. Something steadier held me up. No, Serena, I said, finally meeting her eyes with unflinching steadiness. I won't be your villain. I won't be your doormat either. For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. Even the ocean beyond the yard seemed to pause. Then, without another word, I turned. The garden stones pressed cool against my feet as I walked away, each step deliberate, echoing louder in my ears than the chatter behind me. My keys dug into my palm like weapons. Rain. Serena's voice rose sharp, now stripped of charm. Don't be difficult. We have family obligations. The word echoed in the air as I slid into my car. Obligations. Always my obligations to them, never theirs to me. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Serena standing rigid, clipboard clutched in her hands, frustration distorting her face. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the familiar wash of guilt when I said no. Instead, I felt something new. Determination. And underneath it, the quiet thrill of a battle line finally drawn. The drive back to my apartment blurred into a haze of asphalt and sea wind. I hardly remembered the turns I took or the red lights I stopped at. My hands were clenched so tightly on the wheel that my knuckles glowed, pale tendons aching. I should have felt outrage, maybe even terror, but instead I felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out the center of me and left only a shell behind. The silence of my apartment hit me like a wave when I walked in. No chatter, no orders being barked, no floral perfume hanging in the air. Just the low hum of my refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock. I sank onto my sofa, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, my mind replayed not the present, but every past moment that had led here. I remembered the day I bought the house as vividly as if I'd just walked out of the closing office. I was 28, working 70-hour weeks at Coastal Florida Bank, skipping nights out subsisting on frozen dinners and caffeine pills. My coworkers bought handbags and weekend getaways. I socked every dollar away into savings. When the realtor finally slid the keys across the table, my hands shook so violently I nearly dropped them. The house wasn't enormous or fancy. It was small, weather-worn, with chipped paint and a roof that needed replacing. But to me, it was paradise. A porch swing that faced the ocean, a yard shaded by a sturdy oak that had stood longer than I'd been alive, and the hush of waves every night as I fell asleep. I drove straight there from the office, still in my bank blazer and heels, and sat on that swing until the sun set, whispering to myself, "You did this, Rain. You carved out something that's yours." And then came my family. I'd invited them that first weekend out of excitement. I wanted them to see what I'd achieved. Dad had clapped my shoulder with a broad smile, but his words carried an edge I ignored at the time. Beautiful spot. You know, the family could have pooled our money for something bigger, something we could all use. Mom had scanned the place critically, murmuring, "It feels selfish for one person. Would have made a perfect family retreat." And Serena, champagne glass in hand, twirling in her sundress, had laughed. "This is perfect for family weekends. My friends are going to love this place." I'd laughed too, though it felt brittle. Deep down, a tiny fissure opened, warning me that maybe my name on the deed wouldn't matter to them. That fissure widened quickly. At first, it was little things. Mom borrowing the house for her church ladies' brunches, Dad inviting business partners to unwind by the ocean, Serena showing up with college friends, leaving behind wet swimsuits and empty bottles. Each time I told myself it was harmless. That's what family does, shares. But sharing implies consent. What happened was invasion. I remembered the first time I returned after a weekend shift to find 12 strangers sprawled in my living room. Serena's friends. A couple of them had rifled through my bookshelves, one had even tried on my sun hat, laughing into the mirror. When I confronted Serena, she'd rolled her eyes. "Relax, Rain. You're so uptight. It's just a house." Just a house. My sanctuary, my prize for years of sacrifice, reduced to just a house. Then there was the 4th of July fiasco. I'd planned a quiet evening with 2 friends' pizza fireworks from the porch. When I pulled up my driveway, overflowed with cars. The backyard thumped with music. I stepped inside to find nearly 30 relatives, half of whom I didn't even know, crammed into my kitchen drinking beer from my fridge. No one had told me. Mom had waved me over cheerfully as though nothing was amiss. "Oh, darling, don't scowl. It's perfect here for parties. You should be proud to host." Proud, I'd ended up scrubbing red wine out of my grandmother's quilt until 3 in the morning. Each time when I dared complain, I heard the same refrain. "We're family. Don't be so rigid. Don't be difficult." And slowly I believed them. I began apologizing for setting boundaries, guilt gnawing at me whenever I dared say no. One winter, I even loaned Serena the keys for what she promised was a quiet weekend with Thomas. When I arrived afterward, I found cigarette burns on my porch furniture and muddy paw prints across my white carpet. When I texted Serena, her reply was short, "Not my problem." Guests brought a dog. I cried that night not from the mess, but from the realization that my family didn't see me as Rain, the sister, the daughter. They saw me as a resource, a facility, a convenience. And through it all, I endured. I clenched my jaw, swallowed my protests, and told myself it wasn't worth the fight. That blood was thicker than pride. But sitting there on my sofa now, replaying Serena's smile as she called me the generous sister in front of strangers, something shifted. I thought about the invitations that listed my address without my consent. The Instagram post Serena had once made of herself on my porch with the caption, "Can't wait to host friends at our family beach house." As if my sacrifice, my struggle, had been absorbed into the collective entitlement of the Bennetts. And suddenly, every tiny moment I had excused came flooding back, not as isolated annoyances, but as evidence, a pattern, proof that this wasn't new. This wedding wasn't an accident. It was the culmination of years of erosion, each boundary worn down until there was nothing left to protect me. Until now. Because for the first time, the rage rising in me didn't curdle into guilt. It solidified into clarity. They'd mistaken my silence for permission, and Serena, arrogant, entitled Serena, was about to learn the truth. This wasn't just a house. It was mine, and I was done letting them take it from me. The hum of my Subaru's engine carried me away from the beach house like a lifeline I clutched with both hands. The further I drove, the smaller my sister's clipboard figure became in the rearview mirror until she was nothing more than a blurred shadow swallowed by palm trees and ocean light. For the first time in years, I didn't look back out of guilt. I looked forward, eyes fixed on the road knuckles white on the wheel. My phone buzzed nonstop on the passenger seat, Serena's name flashing across the screen again and again. 3 calls, 5, 10. I ignored each one. Then came texts. "Rain, stop being dramatic." "Rain, we need you to approve the seating chart." "Rain, Mom says call her now." Every vibration only tightened the strange calm spreading through me like the eye of a storm settling over my body. By the time I reached my apartment an hour later, my body trembled with exhaustion from holding myself upright. I dropped my purse on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the sofa. The silence enveloped me, broken only by the insistent buzz of my phone. I flipped it face down, refusing to let their words invade my walls. But my mind wouldn't rest. The images replayed on a merciless loop, Serena directing strangers under my oak tree. Vanessa calling me generous, the embossed gold invitation naming my house as her wedding venue. Each scene twisted deeper until anger and disbelief knotted into a ball lodged under my ribs. I forced myself upright, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. If I couldn't silence my thoughts, I'd channel them. My fingers flew across the keys, Serena Bennett wedding. The search results loaded and bile rose in my throat. The first hit was Serena's Pinterest board beach house dream wedding, created 8 months ago. My beach house, my oak tree pinned and reposted with captions about fairy lights, coastal elegance, and seashell centerpieces. Each pin mocked me with its cheerful pastel fonts, "Our perfect day." Venue secured, thanks to my amazing sister for sharing her home. 8 months. They had planned this for 8 months. I clicked to her Instagram, stomach twisting. A photo from 3 weeks ago appeared, Serena and Thomas champagne glasses raised high, standing proudly on my porch. My porch swing behind them, my lanterns, my railing. The caption punched me in the chest. Final walkthrough at my amazing sister's beach house. Blessed to share our dream venue with family. Below, comments from relatives stacked up like stones, crushing me. So wonderful of Rain to donate her home. What a selfless sister you have. Family is everything. Donate selfless I had done neither. I hadn't been asked. I hadn't even been told. The buzzing of my phone resumed insistent. I glanced at the screen and froze when I saw the sender, Thomas. A single text, Rain. "I'm sorry about all this. I told Serena we should ask you properly. This wasn't my idea. For a moment, I just stared. I didn't know if it was cowardice or honesty, but at least someone had admitted it wasn't right. Before I could reply, another call lit up the screen. Mom. Against my better judgment, I answered. "There you are!" She snapped, her tone sharp as glass. "What on earth were you thinking driving off like that? Serena is beside herself. Vanessa needs your input on the menu." "Mom!" I cut in, my voice tight. "Did you know that Serena was planning her wedding at my house without asking me?" A pause. The silence told me everything before she spoke. "Well, of course I knew. We all did. It's not like you use that place much anyway." My hand trembled as I scrolled through old messages on my laptop, eyes scanning. And there it was, evidence hiding in plain sight. A text chain between Mom and Dad from 4 months ago. "Mom, Rain won't mind about the wedding. She never uses the house anyway. Serena needs this." "Dad, should we at least mention it to Rain, Mom?" "Better not. She might overthink it. You know how she gets. Serena says it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission." My breath caught. Forgiveness, not permission. They had decided I was easier to dismiss than respect. "Are you even listening?" Mom's irritated voice jolted me back. "I have to go," I whispered and hung up. The silence that followed was different now, not peaceful, but charged alive with something sharp blooming in my chest. Determination. I dug deeper. Old group chats I'd been excluded from suddenly made sense. Cousins coordinating carpools, aunts debating whether to bring extra chairs, photos of my oak tree posted with captions about Serena's magical venue, everyone assuming everyone celebrating my generosity that had never been offered. I pulled my property deed from the filing cabinet, smoothing the crumpled paper with shaking hands. My name. Only my name. Rain Elizabeth Bennett. Every mortgage statement, every utility bill, every dollar came from my account alone. The realization struck like lightning. This wasn't about a party or even a wedding. This was about respect, and I was done begging for it. I opened a fresh browser tab and typed Florida trespassing laws. Unauthorized use of private property. Another average utility cost for 150 wedding guests. Another liability insurance for unapproved events. Numbers and clauses filled my screen, forming a picture clearer than anything my family had ever admitted. What they were doing wasn't just unfair. It was illegal, costly, dangerous. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Marlene, my best friend since college. Her voice burst through the speaker before I could say hello. "Rain, is it true? I just got an invitation. Serena's wedding at your house." "Since when are you hosting?" The dam inside me cracked. I explained everything, voice trembling, but growing stronger with each detail: the Pinterest board, the secret group chats, the invasion of my yard. When I finished, Marlene's response was firm. "Rain, listen to me. You are not crazy. This is outrageous. They're exploiting you. What are you going to do?" I closed my laptop slowly, my reflection staring back at me in the black screen. My eyes were red, but behind them flickered something unfamiliar. "I don't know yet," I admitted, then almost to myself, "but I'm done being a doormat." And as those words left my lips, I realized this was the turning point. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being called selfish. I was ready to fight back. The next morning, I woke to the insistent buzz of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. The sunlight filtered weakly through the blind's stripes of pale gold cutting across the room. I reached for the phone with a groggy hand, but before I could swipe, I noticed the sheer number of notifications stacked across the lock screen: 33 missed messages. Half from Serena, the rest scattered between Mom, Dad, and aunts who rarely texted me at all. For a long moment, I just stared at the glowing rectangle, my stomach sinking as though I were peering over the edge of a cliff. Then I silenced it, tossed it face down, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. Coffee. I needed coffee before I faced another battle. The drip of the machine was almost hypnotic, grounding me. As the scent of dark roast filled the room, I opened my laptop again. The night before, I'd scratched only the surface. Today, I was ready to dig deeper to expose every thread of this betrayal. I began with the group chats. Months earlier, Serena had accidentally mentioned something about family updates, then backpedaled when I asked what she meant. That lie itched at me now. I scrolled through my iCloud backups, searching until finally buried in an old folder I found them. Screenshots from a cousin who'd once slipped up sending me an image meant for the family group. At the time, I'd ignored it, assuming it was trivial. Now, opening it again, I saw it for what it really was, the hidden planning board of my erasure. Message after message confirmed my worst fears. Cousin Ellie, so excited about Serena's beach wedding. Uncle Martin, where should we park? Maybe overflow down the block. Aunt Carol Rain's house is perfect for this. Can't wait to see it. Mom, yes, it's already decided. Rain won't mind. She never uses it anyway. I scrolled further, bile rising. Serena Rain tends to overthink things. Better not to tell her until it's too late to back out. Dad, exactly. Let's not stress her. It's family, we'll smooth it over later. My hand shook on the trackpad. Overthink things. That was their excuse to erase me, to carve me out of decisions about my own property, because it was easier than confronting me directly. I dug through more archives, dredging up old email chains, and there it was. Again, proof I hadn't been imagining their collusion. Subject: Beach House Logistics, from Mom, to Serena, Dad, Aunt Linda. Rain won't need to know every detail. It'll overwhelm her. Just focus on what Serena needs. This is her special moment. Rain will fall in line, she always does. A cold wave rolled over me as I read those words. My own mother had typed them, dismissing me not as a daughter, but as a barrier to be managed. I shoved my coffee aside, heart pounding now. My family had not simply forgotten to tell me. They had orchestrated a full-scale conspiracy of silence. Every one of them knew. Every one of them had chosen convenience over respect. And worst of all, they had assumed my compliance was guaranteed. A memory surged forward, sharp and uninvited. I was 12 again, clutching my science fair project, a solar system model I'd worked on for weeks. Serena had borrowed my paints without asking, ruining half the planets in the process. When I'd complained, Mom had sighed. Don't make a fuss, Rain. She's younger. Let her enjoy. Dad had chuckled. You're too sensitive. Back then, I'd swallowed my hurt and rebuilt the planets alone. Now, decades later, nothing had changed. They still thought of me as the too sensitive sister, the one whose boundaries didn't matter. But this time, I wasn't 12. And this time, they weren't taking my planets. They were trying to take my life's greatest achievement, my sanctuary, my home. I pressed my palms flat against the desk and drew a long, steady breath. No more, I whispered aloud, the sound startling in the quiet apartment. I needed validation, someone outside the family echo chamber, to tell me I wasn't losing my grip. So I called Marlene again. She answered on the second ring. Please tell me you didn't cave. I laughed bitterly. Cave, no. But I found the proof. They've been planning this for months, deliberately keeping me in the dark. I recited the screenshots, the emails, the casual cruelty of my mother's words. Marlene was silent for a beat. Then her voice sharpened steel beneath velvet. That's not just inconsiderate, that's gaslighting. They know you've always tried to keep peace, so they banked on you staying quiet. They're not just stealing your house, Rain. They're stealing your voice. The truth of her words hit me squarely in the chest. They've always done this, I admitted softly. Every boundary I tried to set, they brushed aside. Every time I said no, they made me feel guilty until I gave in. And I let them. For years. But not anymore, Marlene said firmly. This is where it stops. After we hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the evidence spread across my screen. Mom's texts, Serena's group chats, Dad's complicity. It was all there. And as I pieced it together, a new realization settled over me. This wasn't just Serena's betrayal. It was systemic. A whole family culture of disregard that had chipped away at me since childhood. They called me the dramatic one, the difficult one, the sister who made problems out of nothing. But what they really meant was I was the one who noticed, the one who resisted. And now they were about to learn that my resistance had teeth. Because I wasn't going to let them bulldoze me again. Not this time. Not ever again. By mid-afternoon, the weight of discovery sat so heavily on my chest that I could barely breathe. The screenshots, the group messages, the emails, they circled my mind like vultures, each one reminding me that my own family had written me out of my story. Alone in my apartment, I felt like the walls were closing in. I needed air. and I needed someone who wasn't part of this toxic orbit. I grabbed my keys and drove to Marlene's townhouse on the edge of town. She answered the door before I even knocked twice, her face etched with concern. Rain. Her tone was both question and comfort, the way only a friend who's seen you through breakups, job failures, and family meltdowns can speak your name. I stepped inside, collapsing onto her couch before the door even clicked shut. She followed, handing me a mug of tea she must have prepared while watching my car pull in. That was Marlene, always anticipating what I needed before I could articulate it. The words tumbled out of me in a flood. I told her about the wedding invasion, the invitations with my address, the group chats plotting around me, Mom's casual dismissal in those texts. My throat burned from holding back tears, but my voice grew steadier with each detail. By the time I finished, Marlene's hands were gripping her mug so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "They've crossed the line," she said finally, her eyes blazing. "No, scratch that. They bulldozed past the line, burned it, and laughed while doing it." Her anger was validating a mirror of my own outrage. "But they're my family," I murmured, the old script trying to reassert itself. What if I really am overreacting? Marlene slammed her mug onto the coffee table so hard tea sloshed over the rim. "Rain, listen to me. This is not overreacting. This is about basic respect. They didn't ask. They didn't even tell you. They treated your property like communal property. That's not family, that's exploitation." The word sent a shiver down my spine. Exploitation. I'd never dared frame it that way before, but once she said it, I couldn't unsee it. "I've always let them," I admitted softly, "because it was easier than fighting. Every time I pushed back, they accused me of being selfish. And I believed them." Marlene leaned closer, her gaze fierce. "That's the trick, Rain. They've conditioned you to believe protecting yourself is selfish. But boundaries aren't selfish, they're survival. You've been surviving without them for years, and look where it's gotten you erased from your own life." I swallowed hard. Her words cracked something inside me, but instead of pain, what seeped out was clarity. When I left her house that evening, the sky was streaked with purples and oranges. For the first time in days, the knot in my chest had loosened. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. The next morning, I trudged into the bank where I worked, exhaustion still etched into the lines of my face. My co-worker, James, glanced up from his cubicle as I slid into mine. He was the kind of colleague who noticed things most people didn't, the extra coffee cups piling on your desk, the way your shoulders slumped lower each week. "You okay?" he asked, voice low, so the branch manager wouldn't overhear. I hesitated instinctively, tempted to brush him off with a fake smile. But then I remembered Marlene's words. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're survival. And somehow that gave me permission to be honest. "Family drama," I said, my tone dripping with irony. "My sister decided my beach house is her wedding venue. Without asking me. The wedding planner called me the generous sister. Meanwhile, I found group chats proving my whole family knew and just didn't bother telling me." James's eyebrows shot up. "They did what?" I laughed hollowly. "Yeah, apparently it's easier to erase me than ask me." For a moment, James was silent. Then he leaned forward, resting his arms on the partition between our desks. "Let me guess they're acting like you're the problem for not going along." My head snapped up. "Yes, exactly. How did you—" He gave a humorless chuckle. "Because I've lived it. My brother used to borrow my car all the time. Never asked. Brought it back on empty, sometimes scratched. When I finally told him no, the whole family acted like I'd committed treason. Took me years to realize family can be the worst boundary violators, because they think blood entitles them to forgiveness on tap." His words echoed Marlene's, and together they formed a chorus I hadn't realized I needed. "So what did you do?" I asked cautiously. James's mouth twitched into a grin. "Changed the locks. Put the keys in a safe only I could access. When he showed up screaming, I told him exactly what you should tell your sister. This is mine. Not yours. Not ours. Mine." He hated me for a while, but eventually he got the message. Sometimes you have to teach people how to treat you, Rain, even family. The truth in his voice sank deep into my bones. That evening, when I returned home, I scrolled through Serena's endless missed calls. Dozens of voicemails, each dripping with manipulative sweetness or rage. Mom's guilt trips Dad's attempts at reason, Serena's tearful accusations. But for the first time, I didn't feel crushed by them. I felt ready. Because now I had something I'd never had before: allies who saw the situation clearly. People who weren't tangled in the family's web of guilt and obligation. People who reminded me I wasn't crazy for wanting respect. Marlene's fury, James's pragmatism. Both voices echoed in my mind as I stood at my window watching the lights of Sandpiper Beach twinkle in the distance. A plan was forming, quiet but unstoppable, like the tide rolling in. And when it broke, it wouldn't just defend me. It would change everything. The following Friday, I sat at my desk at the bank, staring blankly at a mortgage application, while my phone buzzed like an angry hornet nest beside me. Serena, Mom, Dad, aunts, cousins. Each name flashing across the screen like they'd been programmed to alternate shifts of harassment. My inbox filled with messages that ranged from sugary guilt, "We're family, Rain, don't make this harder than it needs to be," to outright threats. "If you ruin this wedding, don't expect us to forgive you." I muted the phone, shoved it in a drawer, and pressed my palms to my temples. The tide of pressure was rising, but for once I didn't feel like drowning. I felt like a swimmer standing on the sand, ready to choose when I entered the water and how. That evening, I drove back toward the beach house, my heart pounding like I was approaching enemy territory. I parked across the street, engine off, headlights dark. From my car, I watched strangers swarm across my lawn. Men carried floral arrangements into my porch. 2 women lugged crates of wine through my front door as if it were theirs. I counted at least a dozen vehicles jammed along the curb. I clenched the steering wheel so tightly my nails left crescents in my palms. They weren't even pretending anymore. My sanctuary had become a community center, a public playground. My phone buzzed again, this time from Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor, 2 doors down. "Rain, lots of people coming and going from your place lately. Is everything okay?" That text was the spark I needed. I opened my glove compartment, pulling out the folder that contained my deed mortgage statements and insurance documents. I'd started carrying it everywhere like armor. Tonight, it wasn't just for comfort. Tonight, it would become my weapon. The next morning, I marched into the hardware store just as it opened. I walked out with 3 new locks, a set of spare keys, and 2 security cameras. My hands shook as I carried the bags, but not from fear, from adrenaline. By noon, a locksmith was drilling into my front door while I stood guard, arms crossed, daring anyone to object. The cameras went up next, discreetly tucked under the eaves, their tiny red lights blinking like watchful eyes. For the first time in years, I felt the balance of power tilt back toward me. When I returned to my apartment that night, I sat at my desk and composed the email that would set the battlefield. Subject: Beach House access to family group from Rain Bennett. Effective immediately, no one may enter my property at 219 Pelican Way without my explicit permission. The locks have been changed for security reasons. Anyone wishing to visit must contact me directly and arrange access. This is not optional. This is not negotiable. My home is private property. Treat it as such. I hit send. Within minutes, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. "Mom, don't be ridiculous, Rain. We're family. Give us the new key. Dad, call your mother. She's upset." Serena, 3 missed calls followed by a voicemail shrieking, "How could you be so selfish? You're ruining my wedding." I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my sofa, and opened a new tab on my laptop. That's when I stumbled across a listing from Sandpiper Beach Tours. Looking for unique properties to host our high-end clientele, short-term rentals considered, oceanfront homes preferred. I clicked through. The rental rates made my eyes widen. More than triple what I'd earn if I ever tried to rent privately. In the contracts, ironclad. Liability-covered damages, reimbursed exclusivity guaranteed. An idea unfurled in my chest like a banner snapping open in the wind. They wanted to use my home without respect. Fine, I'd make sure they couldn't use it at all. For the next 3 hours, I worked like a woman possessed. I documented the current condition of the house, photographing every corner, every piece of furniture, every floorboard. I uploaded them into a file labeled "Before Wedding Invasion." I combed through the rental company's contract line by line, highlighting the clauses about exclusive use. I drafted my own addendum noting dates, protecting my rights. By the time midnight rolled around, I had sent everything to the Sandpiper Beach Tours manager. 2 hours later, I received a confirmation email. Thank you, Ms. Bennett. We are delighted to reserve your property for the weekend of June 14th, 16 for our corporate retreat. Deposit paid in full. Exclusive use guaranteed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing screen, my chest rising and falling like I'd just run a marathon. It was done. The house was no longer available for Serena's wedding, not by guilt, not by force, not by manipulation. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the responsible sister who always caved. I felt like the general of my own war. The messages from my family kept flooding in, but now I scrolled through them with a detached calm. Guilt no longer reached me. Their words, once sharp as knives, now clattered harmlessly against the shield I had built. Because this time I wasn't just reacting. This time I had a plan. And it was airtight. I woke the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Sunlight streamed through my blinds, catching dust motes in the air, but instead of the usual weight pressing on my chest, I felt light, powerful. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was strategizing. When I checked my email, the confirmation from Sandpiper Beach Tours gleamed like a medal of honor. The deposit had already hit my account. My house was legally booked for a corporate retreat on the exact weekend Serena had chosen for her wedding. The irony tasted sweeter than any champagne toast she'd imagined. I printed every document, the signed contract, the proof of payment, the liability clauses. I slipped them into the same blue folder that already held my deed and mortgage statements. This folder had become my shield, my sword, my evidence of ownership in a war where my family thought my silence equaled surrender. But this wasn't just about Serena. It was about years of being overlooked, dismissed, treated like the family doormat. Every unpaid repair bill, every unreturned borrowed item, every uninvited party, they had all led to this moment. And now I finally had leverage. Still beneath my satisfaction lurked a thorn of fear. I knew my family wouldn't take this quietly. Serena especially would see it not as justice, but as betrayal. The self-appointed star of our family's story never tolerated being told no. I didn't have to wait long for the backlash. By noon, my phone vibrated with Serena's voice message, her tone shifting wildly from pleading to furious within 60 seconds. Rain. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this is my wedding. My wedding. You can't just cancel it out of spite. Do you want to humiliate me in front of everyone? Thomas's parents are flying in from Chicago. The caterers already ordered the seafood, the DJ's been paid. You can't do this to me. Don't be cruel. Please, fix this before it's too late. For years, I would have melted at her voice, convinced myself that sacrificing my peace for her happiness was the noble choice. But now I only felt a grim calm. I played the voicemail again, slower this time, noting how she never once said the word ask. It was all commands, accusations, and assumptions. That said everything. That afternoon at work, James stopped by my cubicle, balancing 2 coffees. He handed me one without a word, but when I met his eyes, he must have seen the fire there. You did something, he said, half grinning. I couldn't help but smile back. Let's just say Serena won't be using my house anymore. Good James said simply, sometimes you have to burn the bridge so they stop marching across it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Marlene, the rental contract spread between us. She studied it with the concentration of a lawyer, though she was only a marketing consultant by trade. This clause, she said, tapping the paper. Exclusive use. That means Serena literally cannot host anything on your property that weekend without violating a binding contract. Exactly, I said, sipping wine. And if she tries? I grinned a smile I hardly recognized on myself, sharp assured. Then the tour company's lawyers will handle her. Not me. Marlene laughed, clinking her glass against mine. Rain, I've never been prouder of you. You're finally standing up for yourself. Her words warmed me, but underneath I felt something deeper, something almost frightening. I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was preparing to win. The next day, Serena called again. This time I answered. What did you do? She demanded, her voice high brittle with fury. Good morning to you too, I said evenly. Don't play dumb. There are people at the house saying they have a contract for a retreat next weekend. That's my wedding date. No, I corrected gently, almost sweetly. That's their retreat date. At my house. You can tell them to leave, she screeched. I let silence stretch between us until she nearly choked on it. Then I said, calm as stone. You never asked me, Serena. You assumed. You treated me like a resource, not a sister. This is what happens when you assume. She sputtered, furious. You're ruining everything. No, I said, and my voice surprised even me with its steadiness. I'm reclaiming what's mine. I hung up before she could answer. The power in that simple act surged through me like electricity. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for permission to speak. I was closing the conversation on my own terms. By the weekend, preparations at the beach house had shifted. The tour company staff began setting up banners and beach chairs. My cameras captured the confusion on my family's faces when they returned, expecting to continue decorating only to find uniformed employees directing them off the property. I watched the footage from my apartment sipping coffee like it was a movie I'd bought tickets to see. Serena's outrage, my mother's attempts at persuasion, my father's hand-wringing, all of it played out in high-definition a live drama in which for once I was not the victim but the unseen director. And when the first guests from the corporate retreat arrived, suitcases in hand, and Serena's carefully constructed illusion crumbled, I felt a rush so intoxicating it left me breathless. For years they had assumed I would cave, that my silence equaled surrender. But now, with one signed contract, I had flipped the script. They thought they were using me. But it turned out I had been playing them all along. I should have expected it, the ambush. My family has never confronted issues directly. They stage productions. They rally around Serena like she's a princess whose honor must be defended while I'm cast as the villain who must be shamed back into line. So when Mom called and insisted we meet for dinner at Coral Gables, I knew exactly what it was. Not dinner. An intervention. Marlene refused to let me go alone. You're not walking into the lion's den without backup, she said firmly, sliding into the passenger seat of my Subaru. She carried a notebook like a lawyer prepping for trial, her lips set in a thin, fierce line. We pulled into the restaurant's lot at sunset. Through the window, I spotted them immediately, Mom in her pearls and pressed linen suit Dad with his tie loosened, but his posture rigid, Serena dabbing her eyes dramatically with a napkin, and Aunt Linda, of course, Aunt Linda, the family's self-appointed moral authority, sitting stiffly at the end of the booth. You don't have to go in, Marlene murmured, reading the hesitation in my clenched jaw. Yes, I said quietly, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I do. The restaurant smelled of grilled fish and garlic butter, but the atmosphere at that table was suffocating. Serena launched the attack before I even slid onto the bench. My dream wedding is ruined, she declared loud enough for nearby diners to glance our way. Her mascara-smudged eyes darted around for sympathy. The alternative venue is tiny, and Thomas's family is furious. Do you know how humiliating this is for me? I folded my napkin slowly, deliberately. Your humiliation isn't my responsibility. Mom gasped, clutching her pearls as though I'd spat blasphemy. Rain. Elizabeth, how dare you speak that way? After everything I've done for you, after all the sacrifices driving you to piano lessons, paying for your braces, staying up late to help with your essays, this is how you repay me, by sabotaging your sister's happiness. My father cleared his throat, his reasonable businessman voice sliding into place. Sweetheart, we understand you feel blindsided, but surely we can work something out. This hostility isn't necessary. Aunt Linda leaned forward, her eyes sharp as needles. Rain families are meant to support each other. Your grandfather would be ashamed to see such selfishness. There it was, the nuclear weapon. Grandpa Joe Saint of the Bennett family, whose shadow they wielded like a cudgel. He'd been gone 15 years, but his imagined disappointment was still their favorite leash. My hand trembled under the table, but my voice didn't. Name one time, I said evenly, turning to Serena, that you asked before using my house. She blinked, thrown. What? One time, I repeated louder now. Name one weekend when you called me, first asked permission and respected my answer. Just one. Her mouth opened, then closed. Silence. I turned to my parents. Name one visit where you didn't bring extra people I'd never met. One occasion when you treated it as my property instead of the family clubhouse. The silence stretched longer. Even Aunt Linda fidgeted. Marlene slid her phone across the table toward them. On the screen was a calendar color-coded and damning. Rain asked you to respect her boundaries 26 times over the past 3 years, she said coolly. Text messages, emails, phone calls, all documented. Each time she was ignored. The table fell silent. My father shifted uncomfortably. Mom's lips pressed so tight they turned white. "It's done anyway." I said, my voice calm, but carrying weight. I reached into my bag and pulled out the blue folder. I slid a document across the table, the paper whispering against the wood. "The house is rented to Sandpiper Tours for the weekend. Contract signed. Deposit paid. It's legally binding. They have exclusive use of the property. Your wedding cannot be held there." Serena snatched the paper with shaking hands, scanning it. Her eyes widened, then narrowed into slits. "You what?" I sat back, folding my arms. I protected what's mine. Her face contorted fury, overtaking her practiced tears. "You've destroyed me. Everyone will think I'm pathetic. Do you know what Thomas's parents are saying? That I can't even secure a venue for my own wedding because my selfish sister betrayed me." "No," I said softly. "They'll know the truth that you tried to steal from me and got caught." My father leaned forward, his voice trembling with the weight of false reason. "Rain, think carefully. This decision will have consequences. You're putting distance between yourself and this family that might never heal." "Good," I said simply. The word hung there heavy, irreversible. Aunt Linda gasped. Mom shook her head as if I were a wayward child refusing to eat vegetables. Serena burst into fresh tears, her sobs echoing across the restaurant like a performance for an invisible audience. But for once, I didn't flinch. Marlene touched my arm under the table, grounding me. And in that moment, I felt it the strange calm, again, cool and steady. The weight of their disapproval no longer pressed me into submission. Instead, it rolled off me like water sliding down stone. I was no longer the family's doormat. I was the owner of my house, my life, my voice. And they were finally learning what it meant to hear me say no. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and sharp, the Florida sky a startling blue that almost mocked me. I sat in my car, parked a block away from the beach house, binoculars resting on the passenger seat like contraband. My hands shook only slightly as I lifted them to my eyes, the glass magnifying the scene unfolding across the street. There they were, my family, frantic little ants scurrying across the lawn, setting up like nothing had changed. Serena stood in the center clipboard in hand-barking orders as though she were directing a film set. "Arch needs to move 2 feet left. No, the aisle chairs should curve inward. And someone get Mom. Those roses look wilted." Mom was kneeling in one of my garden beds, fussing with white roses as if coaxing them to life. Dad followed a caterer around, nodding too vigorously, pretending he was in charge. Even cousins I hadn't seen in months were hauling coolers across my porch. My porch, my oak tree, my sanctuary. The sight ignited both fury and a strange, icy calm inside me. I knew what was about to happen, and part of me relished the anticipation. Right on schedule, a white van rumbled into the driveway. The logo on its side gleamed Coastal Florida Tours. 2 more vehicles followed, parking tightly behind. 7 uniformed employees stepped out, clipboards in hand, purposeful as soldiers. I almost laughed at the sound catching in my throat. "Showtime!" Through my binoculars, I caught the exact moment confusion rippled across my family's faces. Serena stiffened her spine, snapping straighter as the tour manager, a tall woman with silver hair pulled in a severe bun, strode toward her with an outstretched hand. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the handshake, the polite but firm smile. Then the manager pulled out the contract. Serena's face transformed. Her carefully rehearsed bride's smile, cracked eyes widening in disbelief. She gestured wildly, shaking her head. The manager merely pointed at the paper again, calm, professional, unbothered by Serena's theatrics. From my car, I could almost taste the panic. Dad hurried over, trying to insert himself into the conversation. Mom abandoned her roses, clutching her pearls as though they could shield her from the truth written on that contract. One of my aunts put a hand over her mouth, shocked, while 2 of my cousins whispered urgently, eyes darting toward the arriving retreat guests. Because yes, 3 more cars pulled into the already crowded driveway. But these weren't wedding guests. They were corporate employees unloading luggage briefcases and branded tote bags. My phone buzzed, a text from the tour manager. We've presented the contract as instructed. Exclusive use established. Your family is resisting, but we are proceeding with setup. I exhaled slowly, lowering the binoculars. My hands steadied. It was happening exactly as I had planned. Back at the house, chaos reigned. Caterers argued with tour staff. Guests arriving early for the wedding were redirected by Dad, whose hands flailed as he tried to explain. I watched one woman put her hands over her face, shaking her head in disbelief. Serena's phone call came through, then her 6th attempt of the morning. This time, I answered. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice crackling through the speaker. I kept my tone calm, almost detached. "Hello to you too. There are people here with clipboards saying they have a contract. For a retreat at your house. My wedding is tomorrow." I corrected her gently. "My house, not your wedding venue." Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. "You can tell them to leave. Just tell them, this is your house. You have the power." "You never asked me," I said, the words falling steady, deliberate. "You assumed. And now the house isn't available. Not tomorrow. Not for the weekend. Not for you." Her sob caught on the line, then fury replaced it. "You're destroying me. Everyone will think I'm pathetic. You have to fix this. Fix it." "No," I said, and this time I smiled as I said it. "I don't." I hung up. Through the binoculars, I watched the fallout spiral. Mom furiously dialed her phone, likely calling every venue within 50 miles. Dad paced, gesturing at confused early guests who were already drifting back to their cars. Serena argued with the wedding planner, her arms slicing through the air in frantic motions. And slowly, surely, the truth spread. Social media updates shifted from excitement to confusion. A cousin posted on Instagram, "Does anyone know what happened to the generous sisters' venue?" 20 minutes later, another relative commented, "Looks like there's some kind of contract issue." Awkward. Awkward. I almost laughed. Then my phone rang again, Thomas. Unlike Serena, his voice was calm, measured. "Rain," he said quietly. "I just want you to know. I always felt uncomfortable about using your house without asking. I told Serena. She didn't listen. I'm sorry you got dragged into this." For a moment, I was too stunned to reply. Respect from the one person I least expected. "Thank you," I said softly. He sighed. "We're moving the wedding to my parents' backyard. It won't be the beach, but honestly, maybe that's better." A pause. "I understand why you did this." After we hung up, I leaned back in my seat, watching the last of the retreat staff unload their materials, registration tables, informational brochures, neat rows of beach chairs for their welcome session. They moved efficiently, unfazed by the circus my family created around them. For once, my house was being treated with professionalism, with respect, and I hadn't had to lift a finger. The phone buzzed again, this time a text from Aunt Gloria, of all people. "Always thought it was strange they used your house without asking. Standing your ground took courage." Unexpected support. The tide was shifting. As the sun dipped lower, painting the waves gold, I put the binoculars down and started my car. The scene behind me descended further into chaos, but I didn't need to watch anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one cleaning up after them. I was the one who set the terms. And they were finally learning what those terms meant. The wedding weekend should have been Serena's crowning glory, the jewel she wore to prove she was the favored daughter, the princess of the Bennett family. Instead, it unraveled like a threadbare curtain, tearing apart under the weight of her entitlement. I watched it unfold from the safety of my apartment feet, curled under me on the couch phone, buzzing every few minutes with updates I hadn't asked for. Family members posted vague but panicked statuses on Facebook, so sad about the venue mix-up, praying for Serena's big day to still be beautiful. Another relative uploaded an Instagram story showing Serena red-faced gesturing wildly at a tent half erect in Thomas's parents' backyard. The caption read, "Not what we expected, but making it work." Making it work. That had always been my role. The fixer, the peacemaker, the sister who swallowed her boundaries and stitched their mistakes together with guilt. But not this time. This time they scrambled without me, and I'll admit, watching from afar, I felt a flicker of satisfaction as their perfect illusion cracked. The calls from my parents came in waves, Mom's voice sharp with disappointment, Dad's voice heavy with faux reason. Rain, this has gone far enough. Your sister is devastated. Do you want to be responsible for ruining her marriage before it even begins? I laughed bitterly into the phone before hanging up. I wasn't responsible for Serena's marriage. I wasn't responsible for Serena, period. But amid the chorus of outrage, something unexpected slipped through small notes of support, like glimmers of sunlight through storm clouds. My phone pinged with a text from my cousin Leah. I know no one says this out loud, but I'm glad you stood up to them. They've taken advantage of you for years. Another came from my Aunt Gloria, the family's quiet observer. You did the right thing. Serena needed a reality check. Even Thomas reached out again, a message that startled me with its sincerity. The wedding went fine in my parents' backyard. It wasn't what Serena planned, but honestly, it felt more real. Thank you for standing your ground. I respect it even if she doesn't yet. Respect. That word hit me harder than any insult my family hurled, because it was the one thing I'd been starving for all these years, the one thing that house symbolized for me. Respect for the nights I worked until dawn. Respect for the sacrifices I made to buy it. Respect for my boundaries, for my no. And slowly it dawned on me not everyone thought I was selfish. Some had simply been waiting for me to fight back to prove I was more than the quiet shadow they could trample over. Meanwhile, Serena turned her fury online. She posted filtered selfies in her wedding gown with captions like, "Some people tried to sabotage me, but love always wins." Her friends chimed in with sympathy, blaming toxic relatives who didn't know how to support a bride. I knew exactly who those words targeted. At first, I bristled, tempted to defend myself, to reveal the contracts, the receipts, the security footage of her trespassing. But then I stopped, because I didn't need to. For the first time, I understood that Serena's validation, my parents' approval, Aunt Linda's scorn, none of it determined my worth. They could scream into the void all they wanted. The truth was written in my deeds, my contracts, my decisions. And deep down, they knew it too. The fallout spread wider than I expected. Word got around our extended family, dividing them neatly into two camps. Some echoed Mom's line that I was selfish, cruel, vindictive. Others more quietly admitted they'd been shocked Serena never asked me in the first place. Family group chats I wasn't part of buzzed with gossip that eventually trickled back to me through cousins who were braver than they let on. One message from my cousin Drew stood out. "Funny how they call you selfish for protecting what's yours, but never called Serena selfish for taking it without asking. Double standard much." I sat back, staring at his words until my eyes blurred. For years, I'd thought I was alone in my frustration. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe some of them had been watching too silently, tallying the ways I was dismissed. But the most surprising fallout came from within myself. I expected guilt to creep back in to gnaw at me in the quiet hours when the phone stopped buzzing, but instead I felt lighter, freer, like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. When I returned to the beach house the following weekend after the retreat, guests had checked out and the tour company had cleaned everything better than my family ever had. I unlocked the door with a new kind of reverence. The air smelled of salt and lemon polish. The furniture sat exactly where I left it, and the porch swing creaked gently in the breeze. No champagne bottles, no muddy paw prints, no strangers rifling through my drawers. Just me, my house, my peace. I walked room to room, touching the walls, the countertops, the oak floorboards, whispering like I had that first night I bought it, "This is mine," and now they know it too. Of course, the battle wasn't over. Serena would never forgive me easily. Mom and Dad would cling to their disappointment like armor. But the fallout had already changed the landscape of our family forever. The unspoken rule that rain bends and everyone else takes was broken. And once broken, it could never be mended the same way. I settled onto my porch swing with a mug of coffee, watching the waves crash against the shore. For the first time in years, I didn't brace for intrusion. I didn't wait for a car to pull up unannounced. I didn't tense at the sound of footsteps, because the boundaries had been set. And this time, I wasn't backing down. 3 days after Serena's makeshift backyard wedding, my doorbell rang. I already knew who it was before I peered through the peephole. Mom stood there in her pressed slacks and powder blue blouse pearls glinting in the hallway light, her mouth tight and her eyes already wet. Dad loomed behind her, posture rigid, the lines around his mouth etched deeper than usual. They hadn't come to visit, they'd come to confront. I let them in without a word. The air between us carried the tension of a storm about to break. Rain, Elizabeth Bennet. Mom began, her voice trembling. How could you humiliate your sister this way? Her wedding was ruined. People are whispering, saying it was tacky. That girl's life is in shambles, and you— Her voice cracked as she clasped her hands. After everything we've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us. Dad stepped forward, his tone deliberately calmer, though his eyes betrayed steel. Sweetheart, we know Serena can be impulsive, but family is family. If you don't make amends, you risk severing ties that can never be mended. Amends. That word, sharp as a dagger, hung in the air. I gestured to the couch. Sit. They hesitated, thrown off by my composure, then sank onto the cushions. I took the chair across from them, placing a thick blue folder on the coffee table between us. Before we discuss amends, I said quietly, I want to show you something. Mom frowned. What is this supposed to be? I opened the folder, laying out photographs one by one. Wine stains on my grandmother's quilt, cigarette burns on the deck furniture, muddy paw prints across my white carpet, a broken lamp from that infamous 4th of July. Every time you or Serena used my house without permission, this is what I came home to, I said. My voice was steady, but my pulse hammered, and every single repair paid by me. Not once did anyone offer to replace what they ruined. Dad shifted uncomfortably. That's just normal wear and tear. No, I cut him off, sliding a stack of receipts across the table. Normal wear and tear doesn't cost thousands. These are repair invoices, all signed by me. Not a single dollar from anyone else. Mom's face flushed anger and embarrassment warring in her expression. Rain, we're family. We shouldn't need formal invitations or contracts to use each other's homes. Family respects each other, I countered, pulling out the deed and placing it squarely in front of them. This is my name, my mortgage, my insurance, my sweat and my money, not Serena's, not yours, mine. For the first time, Mom's voice faltered. But we thought— You thought wrong, I said, firm but quiet. I reached for my phone, scrolling to a video file, and pressed play. On the screen, security footage showed Mom just months earlier leading a group of her church friends through my bedroom. They opened my dresser drawers, laughed at a childhood photo, one of them even sat on my bed. I paused the video and set the phone face up on the table. This is not family bonding. This is trespassing. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. Dad rubbed his forehead, looking suddenly older. You had no right to rent it out. Dad tried weakly, voice gruff. I had every right, I said, tapping the deed. And I exercised it. Legally. Serena's wedding wasn't canceled because of me. It was canceled because none of you respected me enough to ask permission. Silence thickened. For the first time, I saw it in their eyes, not just guilt, but recognition. The truth they'd avoided for years was now undeniable, laid bare in photos, receipts, video. I slid one final paper across the table, a single sheet with 3 bullet points. No one enters my house without explicit permission. Advance notice required for any visit. All spare keys returned immediately. These are my terms, I said. If you want a relationship with me moving forward, you'll respect them. Dad's face darkened. You can't dictate conditions to your own parents. I replied, meeting his gaze. And I am. The silence stretched taut as a wire. Then slowly Dad reached into his pocket and placed a key on the table. Mom hesitated, her eyes flicking between me and the key ring in her purse. Finally, with a sigh, heavy as defeat, she placed her copy beside his. Serena has one too, Mom whispered. I'll get it from her, I said. Mom's eyes filled again, but this time her voice softened. I never realized how much it hurt you. I leaned back, exhaustion washing over me, but steadiness too. Intent doesn't erase impact. I've been silent for too long, and you mistook it for consent. That ends now. As they rose to leave, Dad lingered by the door. She won't take this well, he warned. That's not my responsibility, I answered. Mom turned once more, her voice tentative. Will you come to Sunday dinner next week? I met her gaze, unflinching. I'll let you know by Thursday if I'm available. For a heartbeat, something shifted, a flicker of respect. Or maybe just shock. Either way, she nodded, not arguing further. When the door closed behind them, I stood in the stillness of my apartment staring at the 2 keys glinting on the table. Symbols of years of intrusion finally surrendered. I picked them up, slipped them into my desk drawer, and exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. For the first time in my adult life, my boundaries weren't just words. They were real, enforced, a line in the sand, and no matter what storm came next, I wasn't going back. 6 months passed before the beach house truly felt like mine again. Not just legally on paper it had always been mine, but emotionally, spiritually, in that bone-deep way where a place feels like an extension of your body. It began with small changes. The porch swing that had once held Serena and her friends during their endless selfies now held me and only me, swaying gently at dawn as I sipped coffee and listened to the tide. I bought new cushions in a soft teal that reminded me of the midday ocean, and when I ran my hand over them, I felt ownership in every stitch. Inside, I rearranged furniture that had been shifted countless times by uninvited guests. The bookshelf in the living room now displayed my favorite novels instead of Serena's forgotten magazines. A wind chime, I chose my choice, no one else's, hung from the porch beam, its notes delicate and bright in the salt breeze. Every detail whispered one truth back at me. This is yours, Rain. At work, something unexpected blossomed. Confidence. It was subtle at first, then undeniable. In a meeting one Monday morning, my VP began to take credit for a restructuring plan I'd developed. The old Rain would have stayed silent, smiling politely while resentment burned. But this Rain leaned forward and said, steady as stone, "Actually, that strategy was mine. I'd like to present it." The room had fallen silent. My VP blinked, startled. But then the CEO nodded. "By all means, Rain. The floor is yours." That moment became the seed of my promotion to head of the commercial loan division, and I knew it wasn't separate from the beach house battle. The courage to claim my voice there had spilled into every part of my life. My parents adjusted slowly. At first, Mom tested the new boundaries, calling me mid-week to announce dinner plans instead of asking. I held firm, reminding her each time, "I'll let you know by Thursday if I'm available." To my surprise, she began respecting it. One Saturday, Dad even asked before pouring himself a second glass of water at dinner. The shift was small, but it was seismic. Not everyone accepted the new Rain. Aunt Linda sniffed at family gatherings, muttering that I held grudges. Uncle Steve complained that family shouldn't need rules. I no longer twisted myself in knots to convince them otherwise. Their discomfort wasn't mine to solve. Then came the most surprising development, Serena. It started with small gestures. A text that read, "Congrats on the promotion," a birthday card in her handwriting, short but genuine. Then, one spring afternoon, she called. Her voice was tentative, almost fragile. "Rain, could I come visit just me? No one else. I'll understand if you say no." I hesitated. Every muscle in me wanted to refuse. But something in her tone, uncertain, stripped of entitlement, softened me. "You can come," I said, "but only with my permission. And only for lunch. No parties, no friends." When she arrived that Saturday, she stood on the porch like a guest hands clasped in front of her. She didn't step inside until I invited her. Already that was a shift so radical, I had to swallow my shock. We ate sandwiches at the kitchen table, the light slanting golden across the countertops. Serena glanced around, her gaze lingering on the photos I'd rearranged on the walls. They still showed family, but the order had changed. My friends, my achievements, my travels filled the center. Family came second. "I like what you've done with the place," she said quietly, taking a bite of her sandwich. I nodded. I like it too. The conversation meandered through safe topics, work the weather, a new cafe she'd tried. But then, as she set her glass down, she said something that froze me. "I never thought about how we treated your house before. I just assumed it was partly mine too." Her eyes dropped, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I'm sorry." The words hung between us, fragile but real. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I'd waited years to hear Serena admit fault, but I'd never believed it would happen. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice steady. "That means more than you know." She smiled, then small, tentative but genuine. When she left, she checked her watch and said I should go. Thank you for letting me visit. With permission, of course. I almost laughed, almost cried. Instead, I just nodded. You're welcome. Later that evening, I sat on the porch swing with Marlene and two new friends from my pottery class, pouring wine into mismatched glasses. The sun painted the horizon in streaks of orange and pink, and laughter carried across the deck. For once, my house wasn't full of people who saw it as theirs. It was full of people who respected it was mine and respected me too. As the wind chime tinkled above us, my phone buzzed with a text. Serena, thanks for today. Looking forward to next time. With permission. I smiled as I set the phone aside. Boundaries hadn't shrunk my world as I once feared. They'd expanded it, creating space for relationships built on respect instead of obligation, for friendships that filled me with joy instead of resentment. The beach house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like home. The morning sunlight spilled across the deck in ribbons of gold, the sea breeze carrying the scent of salt and possibility. I sat on my porch swing, a steaming mug of coffee warming my hands, and for the first time in years, I felt no tension between my shoulder blades, no anxiety about who might show up unannounced, no dread of hearing Serena's laugh echo through my hallways. Just peace. It had been nearly a year since the wedding debacle, and in that time, everything had shifted. Not perfectly, nothing with family ever is, but enough to feel like I had stepped into a new life. I thought back to the version of myself who had stood frozen in this very yard watching Serena bark orders under my oak tree. That Rain had been silenced for years, drowned under guilt and obligation. She'd been too afraid to say no, too afraid to be called selfish. But this Rain, the woman sipping coffee while waves lapped the shore, had learned that selfish was often just another word people used when they couldn't exploit you anymore. The changes rippled outward. At work, I thrived in my new role leading the commercial loan division. Colleagues respected me not because I demanded it with volume, but because I finally believed I deserved it. That belief seeped into everything: how I presented, how I negotiated, how I carried myself. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking to make space for others. With my parents, the relationship was cautious but functional. They still tried to tug at old strings, Mom sighing dramatically when I declined Sunday dinner, Dad reminding me of family unity whenever tensions rose. But the difference now was me. I didn't bend. I didn't apologize for choosing myself. And slowly they adjusted. They learned to ask instead of assume. Even small things, Mom calling to request if she could drop off homemade soup, Dad texting before stopping by, felt like victories. Serena was complicated. At first, she avoided me entirely, stewing in her resentment. But marriage has a way of reshaping people. Thomas's quiet influence seemed to soften her edges. She began with texts, short, polite. Then visits always requested, never demanded. One afternoon, she sat across from me at this very table, fiddling with her bracelet before blurting, "I didn't realize how entitled I sounded. I just thought family meant sharing everything." I looked her in the eye and said gently, "Sharing is a gift, Serena. Not a right." She had nodded, eyes glistening, and for once she didn't argue. It wasn't perfect. She would always have that streak of entitlement, that assumption the world should bend to her desires. But at least now she knew I wouldn't. The beach house itself became a sanctuary again, but in a way I'd never known before. Because now it wasn't haunted by resentment. It wasn't littered with evidence of my silence. It was filled with choices that were wholly mine. The teal cushions, the pottery mugs I'd bought with Marlene at a craft fair, the wind chime tinkling softly above, all symbols of my ownership, my freedom. Sometimes I still caught myself flinching at the sound of tires crunching shells in the driveway, expecting another invasion. But more often than not, it was a friend stopping by with wine or a delivery truck bringing something I'd chosen for myself. And every time I remembered, the locks had changed, the rules had changed, I had changed. The best part wasn't the absence of my family's entitlement. It was the presence of something new, friends who respected boundaries, a career that rewarded my voice, a peace inside me I'd thought I'd never find. As the months rolled on, I realized the beach house wasn't just a property. It was a mirror. When I let others trample it, I let them trample me. When I defended it, I defended myself. I glanced toward the shoreline where two sandpipers darted back and forth, leaving trails in the wet sand. The horizon stretched wide and endless, painted in blues and golds. For the first time, the view didn't feel like something I had to protect from being stolen. It felt like something I could finally enjoy. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, a text from Serena. Thinking of hosting a family barbecue this summer. At our place, of course. Want to come? I smiled. The difference in those last 3 words wasn't lost on me. I typed back, "I'll let you know." I set the phone down, leaned back in the swing, and closed my eyes. The wind carried the sound of waves, the soft chime of glass, and beneath it, all the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. Not weighed down, not silenced. Free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving my family. I was living my own story, and I wasn't giving it up for anyone.